Well, I can't confirm or deny whether or not the Israeli Defense Forces special forces have entered into tunnels inside Lebanon. I can tell you that it seems almost inevitable that there's going to be some degree of a ground incursion coming from Israel towards southern Lebanon, riding on the back of these tremendous military successes that we've seen, including obviously the elimination of the command and control of Hezbollah, all of its senior brass, and of course, the Secretary General of that terror organization himself, Hassan Nasrallah. So the reports I'm aware of, it's a little bit premature to confirm or deny them. I think that in order to rid Israel of this 30-year terror nightmare that has been on our border with Lebanon, a ground incursion is an inevitability. Now, there are those who think that it can wait until a later date. I'm not in that camp. I feel that a ground incursion should be the natural corollary and continuation of these great military successes that we've seen. I think it's time to take the fight directly to Hezbollah. And I also would remind everybody that there are 60 to 80,000 Israelis who are still essentially evacuees in their own land, having been moved from their homes when Hezbollah, of its own volition, launched its terror campaign against Israel on October the 8th in solidarity with Hamas after the atrocity that they carried out on October the 7th. Those residents of Israel are very unlikely to return to their homes, absent a cleaning out, removal of the terror infrastructure, including those who are right by the border with Israel at this time. To do that, eventually, sooner rather than later, in my opinion, a ground incursion will be required. What's gone on inside Lebanon is particularly telling in the context of Hamas inside the Gaza Strip, specifically with regard to the return of our hostages. I remind everybody, 250 hostages were taken on October 7th. 101 of them remain inside the Gaza Strip, some of them alive, some of them presumed to have been killed. One of the salvations that Sinwar was seeking was that Hezbollah would come to the aid of Hamas inside Gaza, that Hezbollah would deter Israel from operating extensively inside the Gaza Strip. And if Sinwar, is still alive, and there are questions are buzzing around whether or not he is still of this world, still of this earth, if he is still alive, he will surely know that that safety net of Hezbollah has now been torn asunder. It no longer exists. So if the Israel Defense Force is able to add pressure both on Hamas inside the Gaza Strip and on Hamas where it's located elsewhere, you could yet see a movement on Sinwar's part towards some sort of hostage release deal, because he no longer has the protection of Hezbollah, it having been completely decimated and then some by way of Israel's recent successes. So I don't think that Israel is actually in the midst of a sense of euphoria. I think that it is slowly regaining its confidence. And more importantly, I think that Israel's citizenry is slowly regaining its belief in the ability of the Israel Defense Forces to defend and to protect it when it is at its best. And what we've seen inside southern Lebanon is the Israel Defense Forces and the Israeli defense establishment at its very best. But there is a sense of respect that we must continue to extend towards the capabilities of our enemies, obviously while reviling the tactics and the strategies that they live and operate by. But we have to understand that Hezbollah is a capable fighting force, and of course it does have its patron over there in Iran. Now, in my opinion, Iran, in the absence of a nuclear weapon, which we believe is its current status, when it comes to a kinetic attack from its sovereign soil toward the sovereign soil of the State of Israel, I believe that Iran is actually a paper tiger. In fact, I believe that those who are part of this alliance, including Hamas, including Hezbollah, and certainly including Iran, have been trading, for want of a more elegant phrase, on rep. They have been the regional bullies. They have been bullying and intimidating Israel and Israelis for decades. And now Israel has risen up, it is striking back, and it is showing that these enemies are not able to stand up to Israeli might and Israeli determination. So with regard to Iran, as long as it doesn't have nuclear weapons capabilities. I do think that Israel need not live in fear as to what it can launch towards our sovereign territory. One important note there, you could see Iran target Jews and Jewish facilities overseas, those being far softer targets by way of its proxies and its terror tentacles. Well, if the Israel Defense Forces does commit to a large-scale ground incursion inside southern Lebanon, there are a number of things that need to be taken into account. Number one is just the sheer timing of this conflict. Israel, the IDF, is not alone for the fact that it prefers not to fight during the winter season. Winter is coming, it's well on its way. I would tell everybody to keep in mind that Lebanon is up, obviously, at the northern border of Israel. Winter can be brutal, it can be snowy, there can be treacherous conditions. Israel will want to have this fight over with if it's going as quickly as possible. Also, the terrain inside southern Lebanon is very, very different to the terrain inside the Gaza Strip. It is hilly, there are cliff faces, there is a lot of vegetation, which means that there can be a lot of guerrilla tactics inside the area of southern Lebanon that are not so easily carried out, or frankly cannot be carried out through the same methods inside the Gaza Strip. And of course, while we have many soldiers, many battalions and divisions that have gained tremendous experience inside Gaza during the past 11 months of fighting there, those skills are not like for like transferable. And also the enemy is not the same enemy. Hezbollah is a better trained fighting force than Hamas. Hezbollah is an experienced fighting force, it, for example, having been deeply involved in combating ISIS for many years. And so we will see now the IDF, which is much more experienced than it was prior to October 7th as a consequence of tragic circumstances, facing down a more experienced enemy inside southern Lebanon in the form of Hezbollah. But the Israel Defense Forces is capable of taking the fight to them. It's more than capable of winning that fight. And if the decision is made for the IDF to commit en masse into southern Lebanon, it will meet with victory. The threat from Hezbollah very much remains, despite the fact that its command and control structure has been torn apart. But the rocket fire that Israel was expecting thus far has not materialized. The defense establishment for many years, and probably correctly so, has estimated that a Hezbollah with an intact command structure is capable of firing up to 2,000 munitions towards Israel per day for perhaps as long as 100 days. That's not the rate at which we are absorbing the rocket fire from Hezbollah now. Yes, they are still launching their munitions towards us. Yes, they are increasing their range towards us. Yes, they are firing down on cities such as Haifa. In fact, the main hospital inside Haifa, Rambam Hospital, has had to move all of its patients to its underground facility so that they are sheltered from these rockets that Hezbollah is pelting that city with. But at the same time, remember, by way of the pager detonations that has been attributed by foreign sources toward Israel, by way of the targeted killings of Hezbollah's senior command, and of course the removal of Hassan Nasrallah from the chessboard, Hezbollah is in disarray. So yes, there's still a threat, but it's not close to the coordinated threat that Israel has readied itself for, and that's a consequence of ingenious actions by way of the Israel Defense Forces in recent days. You know, there's something very interesting afoot, which is that on October the 6th, the Israeli defense establishment was said to have fallen into the lull of what is termed over here the conceptia, that there was a conception within the defense establishment about what the threats were that we were facing in Israel, and that conception was actually incorrect, woefully incorrect, as we saw and witnessed by way of the horrors of October the 7th. Hassan Nasrallah seems to have been operating by a similar misapprehension. He believed, he is the individual who brought about the notion of the equation when it came to the tit-for-tat exchange of fire between Hezbollah and the Israel Defense Forces. He always seemed to believe that if he didn't extend his fire from southern Lebanon all the way onto central Israel, then Israel and the IDF would not target, for example, the Dakhia area of Beirut, which is the very area from which he was dispatched. He was wrong about that. He misread the political map, he misread the military map, and he misread the fact that the Israel Defense Forces and the defense establishment and our policymakers no longer assign themselves to the rules of the game as they existed prior to October 7th. So Nasrallah failed to read the new rules of the road. He's paid the price for it.